Kevin, that was amazing. It was an incredible honor to be introduced by you, someone who I have first met years ago, someone who is dedicated to making it possible for more young people to have a chance if they end up in foster care. As Kevin said, this is an issue that's real personal with me. I've worked on it since I was a young lawyer, right out of law school, working for the Children's Defense Fund. I've always believed that when a child has to go into foster care, that child becomes our child, and that every single person should look for ways to help them overcome their struggles. You know, my mom, who was abandoned and rejected by her own parents and then by her grandparents, ended up at the age of 14 working as a housemaid. Probably if she'd been born later, she would have ended up in foster care. And when I learned about the struggles in my own mother's life, I knew that part of what I wanted to do for my life was to help every single child live up to his or her God-given potential. And that has been my mission. I spent a lot of time working on foster care issues in Arkansas as First Lady, as Senator, because the system has failed too many people. As Kevin said, 13 placements, 5 high schools, and yet she ended up going to college. It did take her 7 years. But you know what happens to a lot of kids across our country? They age out of foster care at 18. And then somebody shows up literally with a black plastic garbage bag and says to this young person, put your belongings in there, you're finished. And where are they supposed to go? What are they supposed to do? And you know, the ones like Kevin, who through grit and grace find their way to college. You heard what she said. Where's she supposed to go on Thanksgiving and Christmas? Who takes her in? I want to let you know that as your president, I will first and foremost be a champion for our children. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what your circumstances might be. The first obligation of any nation is to take care of those in the years of their early lives and their later lives. So we will together continue to try to make it possible for more young people to come out like Kevin has, dedicated, strong, and committed to helping others. Kevin, we're behind you 1,000%, and I will do whatever I can in whatever capacity to help you. I am thrilled to be back in Cleveland and in Ohio with so many friends. I love coming here. I love seeing the progress. I love seeing the new construction here in this area. And I love knowing that you've got dedicated leaders like your fantastic Congresswoman, Marcia Fudge. Nobody fights harder for Ohio families. I love working with her. I can't wait to be president and have her as my partner. Because we're going to have an urban strategy. We're going to figure out what we can do, especially to help great cities like Cleveland fulfill its potential. Build partnerships and opportunities for everybody to get ahead and stay ahead. That's the basic bargain of America. That's the bargain I want to be sure we keep. I'm also personally delighted to be here with my friend and your former governor, Ted Strickland. And I know because I watched him as governor. I campaigned for him as governor. He campaigned for me. I've spent a lot of time with him. Nobody cares more deeply and profoundly about what happens to people. He did a great job as your governor, and he will be an important voice in the Senate. I hope you will do everything you can to help Ted get elected to the United States Senate. But I can't recognize two of my friends who are here today without also mentioning two who are not. We just lost the late, great Louis Stokes. He was Cleveland's congressman, and he was America's conscience. He did so much to deal with the problems that our economy presents and our society still unfortunately has. And for me, whenever I think of Cleveland, I always think of my dear friend, who I literally miss every single day, Stephanie Tubbs Jones, your former Congresswoman. Boy, Stephanie was a lot of fun. Probably a lot of you never got a chance to meet her personally. She had the greatest laugh. She made me a better person. She made nearly everybody she dealt with better people. I'll never forget, I came here to Cleveland in 2004 after the election, which was so close and Ohio was so pivotal, to have a hearing with Stephanie about voting. Because there were lots of reports that young people and African Americans in Ohio were waiting in line for hours to vote. University campuses didn't have enough machines, didn't have enough places. But right next door, people showed up and could vote in 10 minutes. 10 hours versus 10 minutes. And I see some heads nodding who remember that. Stephanie and I listened to the stories, mostly from students, mostly from African Americans, some of whom showed up with flyers telling them the wrong time and day to vote. They brought it as evidence that in this great democracy, the longest democracy in the history of the world, there were people who got up every day trying to think about, instead of getting people to vote, to exercise their constitutional rights and responsibilities, to stop them from voting. Well, I'll tell you what, we're still in the midst of that. If Stephanie were here today, just like Marcia does every day, she would be standing up, speaking out. It's wrong. Republicans are doing everything they can to prevent people of color, young people, people with disabilities, older people from voting. It's disgraceful, and as president, I will do everything I can to make it possible for everybody to vote, and I want to see universal registration for all 18-year-olds so that you are recognized as a citizen. This is going to be a big part of this election. You know, folks don't prevent you from voting just for the fun of it. They prevent you from voting because they don't think you'll vote for them. So we're going to have to really stand up. I don't care what you are, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green, you name it. Everybody should be encouraged to vote. Otherwise, our democracy doesn't work the way it should. And that's what we're going to be pushing through this election and then when I'm in the White House. Now, I want to mention a few other people who are in our thoughts and prayers. You know, yesterday, once again, this time horrifically on live television, we saw the terrible consequences of gun violence in America. I don't know how we keep seeing shooting after shooting, read about the people murdered because they went to Bible study, or they went to the movies, or they were just doing their job, and not finally say, we gotta do something about this. It's not just the deaths that are in the headlines. Most of you in this audience know we lose people to gun violence every day. Sometimes they're murdered, sometimes they kill themselves. Sometimes they do both, as the man yesterday did. I know that we have a majority of Americans and a majority of gun owners who support universal background checks in America. And I strongly believe we've got to have common sense reforms to keep weapons out of the hands of criminals, the violently unstable, domestic abusers, and even terrorists who find it pretty easy in our country to get a hold of a weapon if they so choose. It's time to really come to grips with this. It makes no sense that bipartisan legislation supporting universal background checks failed in Congress despite overwhelming support from the public. It makes no sense we couldn't come together to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, people even with court orders against them. Now, I know politics are hard. I've got the scars to prove that. And I know when it comes to gun violence, except for moms who demand action and other groups who have not given up, a lot of people just basically say, you know, it's just too hard. We're not going to try this again. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to keep going. I am not giving up. I'm not going to sit by while more good people die and they get 24 or 48 or 72 hours of TV coverage, and then we all just say, well, there's nothing we can do until the next time people are murdered by gun violence. Here in Cleveland, you know this. Tamir Rice isn't here either. He should be. Poverty. I didn't hear them say anything about what's really going on in the lives of Americans. Now, I will have to tell you, what do they stand for? I think it's pretty clear. Cut taxes on the super wealthy, get out of the way of corporations, let them do whatever they want to do. Well, we've heard that before, and it hasn't worked, has it? You know, I know a little bit about what it takes to be a Democratic president because I know two of them in the last 35 years real well. And I can remember after my husband was elected, within about 24, 48 hours, he got some information that hadn't been available before. And he said to me, it's so much worse than they told us. The deficit was worse. The debt had been quadrupled. In fact, he looked at me and he says, you know, they're just passing it off and moving on. Well, but he went to work, didn't he? The longest peacetime expansion of jobs in American history, 23 million new jobs for young people, for older people, for everybody willing to work. And incomes rose from the bottom, from the middle, and from the top. And then we had a Republican president. We all know what happened there. I remember a few days after the 2008 election, and President Obama called me and said, can you come see me in Chicago? I had no idea why he was asking me. I thought maybe because I was going to be in the Senate from New York, and we'd figure out how we were going to push health care and other important priorities. And first thing out of his mouth is, they didn't tell us how bad it was. And he was facing the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And I don't think President Obama gets the credit he deserves for pulling us out of that ditch. Now, I'm not running for my husband's third term, and I'm not running for President Obama's third term. I'm running for my first term, but I think brags about wanting to deny victims of rape and incest access to health care, to an abortion. Jeb Bush says Planned Parenthood shouldn't get a penny. Your governor right here in Ohio banned state funding for some rape crisis centers because they sometimes refer women to other health facilities that do provide abortions. I would like these Republican candidates to look the mom in the eye who caught her breast cancer early because she was able to get a screening for cancer. Or the teenager who didn't get pregnant because she had access to contraception. Or anyone who's ever been protected by an HIV test. Now, extreme views about women, we expect that from some of the terrorist groups. We expect that from people who don't want to live in the modern world. But it's a little hard to take coming from Republicans who want to be the President of the United States, yet they espouse out-of-date and out-of-touch policies. They are dead wrong for 21st century America. We're going forward, we're not going back. And I personally was both relieved and proud when the Supreme Court upheld the right to marriage equality. And as president, I will defend marriage equality, and I will work to end discrimination against the LGBT community. You don't hear that from the other side of the aisle. This election can't be a race to the bottom. It has to be about strengthening our families, making sure all of our kids have health care and education, a chance to be the most they can be. It's got to be about the right vision for America and who has the skill and determination to lead us there. Other candidates may be out fighting for a particular ideology, but I'm fighting for you. I'm running for president to deliver real results for hardworking American families. So when you do your part, you can get ahead and stay ahead. That is the basic bargain. This is not a new fight for me. As Kevin said, I've been doing this a long time. When I got out of law school, I did go straight to the Children's Defense Fund. I was the chair of the Legal Services Corporation, appointed by President Carter. I started the Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families. As First Lady, I worked hard to reform our adoption and foster care system so kids would not be left out and left behind. And I had the great honor of being one of the people responsible for the Children's Health Insurance Program. I learned those values. I learned those values from my parents, and those values are timeless. They can lead us where we need to go. Of course, things change. Who could have imagined where technology has taken us? But when you get right down to it, what matters is our relationships. What matters is how we treat each other. What matters is the kind of people we are and the kind of world we want to help create. I think about that every day on the campaign trail. And I want to make sure that my new granddaughter has every opportunity she can possibly have, and hopefully she'll have the character and the work ethic to make the most of them. But I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He worked in the lace mills, and he worked really hard. But he always believed his hard work would pay off for his kids. So my dad got to go to college. He went to play football, but he got to go to college. I love looking at those old pictures, you know, those leather helmets that they wore back in the 30s. And then he became a salesman, worked hard again. Then he went into the Navy during World War II and was a chief petty officer. And then when he got out, he started a really small business, but it provided a good middle-class life. I want the middle class to mean something again. And you should not have to be the granddaughter of a former president to believe that America still holds promise for you. You should be able to be the granddaughter of a factory worker or the grandson of a farm worker. If you're willing to do your part, you want to believe, and it should be real, that our country has your back. I know there's a lot of disillusionment about politics. That kind of comes with the DNA of being an American. I think the founders wrote skepticism into the system. Checks and balances, separation of powers. It's one of the reasons we've survived. I mean, we kind of, bumble back and forth, but we always figure out where we're headed. There's that quote attributed to Winston Churchill, you can always count on the Americans. They end up doing the right thing after trying nearly everything else. Well, that sometimes is frustrating, and particularly if you're in it, but also as you're watching it. But it has kept us going. And it has held out opportunity to generation after generation. So I want you to be part of this campaign. I'm here to ask for your help. We're going to fight hard in Ohio. We're going to fight hard from the primary. We're going to fight hard until we win in November of 2016. I want you to spread the word. I want you to join. Now text Ohio to 47246. You can go to HillaryClinton.com for more information. I want to help young people believe, once again, we can make a difference together. I will never forget what Ohio did for me in 2008. You lifted me up when I was down and out. And on that primary night, which held out such an incredible validation in that victory, I spoke